Welcome to our study of Treasury of Precious Qualities by the Omniscient Jigme Lingpa, with the commentary by Longchen Yeshe Dorje Kangyur Rinpoche. So, as always, recognizing the value of what we're doing in terms of ultimately freeing sentient beings from the condition of suffering, kindly generate the intention to free all suffering sentient beings. And we begin with invoking the presence of Jigme Lingpa, the source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable, emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind dhammas, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity. Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So we're presently looking at chapter 6, the chapter on refuge. And we're going to have quite a few categories here today. I think many of you are aware of the wealth of knowledge in the Buddhist traditions, and this inevitably, whenever you could say, dive into something that is, first of all, very well documented, which there's a very rich heritage of knowledge and so forth, it's very often that we come across a lot of intricate information. And today then we're going to be looking at the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So there's going to be a little bit of sort of categories. Anyway, this is very worthwhile. Remember, this is the refuge that delivers us from suffering. So understanding, and even we don't obviously can remember everything, which of course is not obvious. It could very well be that some of you can actually remember all the various qualities that will be enumerated, but just to have a sense of the vastness of the scope of the refuge. So as far as taking refuge itself goes, then we take refuge with particular degrees of engagement. So we talk about various kinds of faith, and we talked a little bit about what we mean with faith last time. We don't talk about simplistic blind faith, but we talk about well-informed faith on the basis of trust, on the basis of critical thinking, on the basis of verifying the validity of this safe haven, which is then the liberation from the dualistic confusion of samsara. But the guide that takes us there, and the guide that protects us from the sufferings of confusion are then the three jewels. So we engage with the three jewels through taking refuge in them. And these we engage with on the basis of us having faith. So here Jigme Lingpa, he writes, of faith, he says, the first is vivid faith. It's followed then by faith that's yearning, confident, and irreversible. Of these four kinds, when taking refuge, faith is needed that, at cost of life and limb, is irreversible. So the commentary then says, people who have noble lineage. Now in the Mahayana, this generally refers to simply anyone who has Buddha nature, but here it's slightly different, and we're coming at, in principle, you could say we're approaching this in terms of the Hinayana, and that's where it says noble lineage in Dharma language, Pakpe Jik in Tibetan. This is a reference to the Arya lineage. According to the Hinayana, it indicates persons who have few desires, who contend with what they have in the way of food, clothing, and dwelling places, and who persevere in purifying negativities and gaining realization. This lineage, or proclivity, is so called because it brings beings to the levels of the Aryas. And Aryas is then what we mean with the Arya, or the sublime beings, are then, as is described here, noble persons with few desires, and also we sometimes think of this also in terms of bodhisattvas. They're also sometimes referred to as Aryas or sublime beings. So people who are of this noble lineage with fortunate karma experience powerful faith from the very outset. By contrast, there is no telling when faith will awaken in the minds of ordinary people whose karmic potential has not been stirred. So this is not about predestination in any way, but it's simply just what are the conditions that are there. We're all very different in terms of our health, in terms of our disposition, our bodies, our minds, and so forth. So faith is also such a conditioned phenomenon. So there will be those who simply don't have much of a connection or whose karmic potential has not really been awoken. You could say that all beings have the potential because all beings possess Buddha nature, but this might be veiled and it might not really be particularly manifest. Kangyur Rinpoche goes on to say, on encountering a Buddha in person, in whom all is harmonious, or simply seeing a representation of one, it is possible for one to be completely inspired with faith. The same can occur on meeting a spiritual master, and it sometimes happens that on reading the sacred texts of scripture, people are moved to tears and their skin stands up in goose flesh, as in the case of Shuracharya. So there's a story here. Shuracharya, otherwise known as Ashvaghosha, was an Indian Brahmin very much opposed to the Buddha Dharma. He challenged the great Pandita Aryadeva in debate, the stakes being that the loser would embrace the tradition of the winner. Ashvaghosha was summarily defeated and was so ashamed that he decided to commit suicide by throwing himself into the Ganges. Aryadeva discovered this and, sending some monks to capture him, had him locked up in the monastery library. Eventually, Ashvaghosha calmed down and, becoming a trifle bored, set about reading the texts. After a time, he was so impressed and moved by the expositions of the Dharma that he underwent a wholehearted conversion. In the course of his reading, he discovered a prophecy about himself to the effect that he was to write a life story of the Buddha. Ashvaghosha was in fact an important poet in the history of Sanskrit literature, and the Buddha Charita, a biography of the Buddha in verse, was composed by him. Now, by the way, with regards to the Buddha Charita, there was a beautiful English translation made of a British colonel, a British officer in the 19th century, and what's it called? It's called The Light of Asia, and it is so exquisitely beautiful. I hope you have the chance. The Light of Asia. I forget what the name of the. I have it here. I forget the name of the Englishman who translated, but it's done so beautifully. So you should treat yourself to it. It's really, really incredible poetic delight. And the thing is, of course, because his background was Christianity, he actually he kind of annoyed his peers and annoyed the church that he had written such a beautiful piece about the Buddha's life, which would have been the translation of this Ashvaghosha. It was, that's the thing. It's not a translation of Ashvaghosha's text, but it's inspired by that. So having read that, he then rewrote this long poem, and called The Light of Asia. But it was so significantly enamored with the Buddha that he was obliged by his contemporary Christian peers to write a similar poem about Jesus. And so he wrote another one that was called The Light of Jerusalem or something like that, but it wasn't nearly as beautiful as the Buddha Charita. And like I say, yeah, The Light of Asia. Anyway, that's it. Thank you. That's right, Sir Edwin Arnold. Yes, that's right. There's two of you who are familiar with this. Such a gem. Yeah. So, so that was Ashwagosha, who, locked up in the library, was deeply touched by the scriptures. Now, this first experience is known as vivid faith. It is a sense of joy felt in response to the qualities of sacred objects or the scriptural teachings. Subsequently, there arises a desire to emulate such qualities within oneself with the same urgency and eagerness with which bees are drawn to flowers. So we first come across something that deeply touches us, that inspires us, a teaching or a great teacher, or perhaps even, temples and so forth. So that's initially just, you could say, somewhat externalized, somewhat, if not voyeuristic, it is somewhat seen as just something, an object that pleases us. But then there's comes something else, and that's the dimension of personal engagement. That's why we actually want to do that. And that's why it says here, this is called yearning faith. Yearning to emulate these qualities. Later one experiences a sense of complete trust in the doctrine of the Four Noble Truths and a confidence in the spiritual master who sets forth the teachings on what is to be abandoned and what is to be adopted. So that's the actual practice of the path in terms of both study and practice. And that's where we then get this kind of certainty about the teaching. This is confident faith. Finally, there arises an irreversible faith, by virtue of which it becomes impossible to turn away from the three jewels, though one's very life be at stake. Generally speaking, when receiving and reflecting on the teaching, and especially when taking refuge, one should have irreversible faith, the commitment to not forsake the object of refuge, even at the cost of one's life. Yeah, that would be good. Us who didn't grow up with the Buddhist teaching and so on, we might want to first, having a little bit of you could say, our culture being somewhat traumatized by the battles with religion, the abandoning of religion and so forth. We naturally have sort of a cultural journey we need to do in terms of freeing ourselves from that. And that's where it might be a little bit difficult for people at first. But the implication is, of course, that we're welcome to study, and we should study. And the more we study, we do gain trust into the teaching and also scrutinize the teachers and so forth. But that is then eventually where we come about, where we can then see this is valid. And of course, that is, in a way, that is the place where we truly take refuge. Let's see here what it says. The translators, they've had similar considerations. It is easy for Western readers to interpret this kind of formulation as an exhortation to martyrdom, which is in fact quite at odds with the Buddhist spirit. The notion of orthodoxy, in the sense of an ideology commanding notional assent, is of no importance in Buddhism, where all the emphasis is placed on inner conviction as the motivating force of genuine spiritual transformation. Thus, the meaning of irreversible faith is to be found not in expressions of belief adhered to doggedly in a confessional sense, but in an inner conviction that is so profoundly as to be ineradicable, irrespective of whatever verbal formulations might be wrung from unwilling lips. This point is best illustrated by the story quoted in Words of My Perfect Teacher of an Indian lay practitioner who was threatened with death if he did not repudiate his refuge in the three jewels. I can only pronounce refuge with my mouth. I am capable of doing so with my heart. The man was executed and accepted death willingly, even though dying for the faith was not his principal objective. So this is obviously not the point, but definitely someone who from the depth of his being was committed to the truth of the Dharma, of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the causes of faith, and there Jigme Lingpa writes, 4 causes are there for the birth of faith: frequenting holy beings, keeping company with wholesome friends, remembering the triple gem, and thinking of the miseries of meaningless samsara. Thence it is that faith comes into being. There are many factors able to instill faith in the mind or to intensify it where it already exists. All, however, may be summarized in 4 crucial circumstances. First is attendance on an authentic spiritual master. Second is association with wholesome friends. Third is mindfulness of the qualities of the 3 jewels. Fourth is reflection on the miseries of the round of existence, so bereft of meaning and sense, and the ruin of this and future lives. Thoughts like these give rise to determination to leave samsara, and a natural and authentic faith comes into being. So, the qualities of the Buddha. So I think this would be then a subsection of what we're talking about here. Let's see. What are we reading? Number 6. Boundless are the qualities of Buddhahood. When 2 illuminations are victorious over veils emotional and cognitive, the eyes of vision, knowledge preternatural, 10 powers, 4 dharanis, and 10 strengths, 4 fearlessnesses, perfect knowledge, 18 distinctive qualities. Buddhahood is all of these complete. Buddha is the Dharmakaya, endowed with supreme qualities, revealed as the Sambhogakaya to a retinue of 10th ground bodhisattvas. So the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddhas are like an inexhaustible array of ornaments. It is said in the Samadhiraj Sutra that if one were to live for as many kalpas as there are grains of sand in the Ganges, one would still not have sufficient time to praise the wisdom qualities of a single hair. So then, speaking about the qualities of the Buddha, then we begin with these 2 objects of elimination. The quality, or what is it we eliminate on the path? The 2 eliminations that would be of emotional and cognitive veils. Anyway, the ultimate qualities of elimination are attained when the emotional and cognitive obscurations are overcome by the 2 kinds of wisdom generated on the paths of seeing and meditation. So now first looking at the wisdom, the wisdom that's generated on the path of seeing. The 112 obscurations eliminated on the path of seeing. The different categories of obscurations to be thus eliminated may be outlined as follows. As it is said in the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, 112 things are driven out by seeing: desire and wrath, pride, ignorance, and doubt, the transitory composite, the extreme and the false, to hold one's view as best, to hold one's discipline as best. Of these root obscurations, driven out by seeing, 5 are views, the other 5 are not. These 10 run counter to the noble truths, 5 directly so: the view of transitory composite, the extreme and false views, and with them ignorance and doubt. The conditioning power of anger undermines the noble truths, and 4 things indirectly counter them. Though all these 10 are found in regions of desire, there is no anger in the form, and formless realms. 112 things we therefore count. Okay, so this is the way this is multiplied. So when we talk about some are the views and some are not the views, then we talk about the views in terms of the view of the transitory composite. Actually, if you saw Tsongsa Khyentse Rinpoche teaching on loneliness, he actually goes over this view of the transitory composite, which is actually where we attribute, you could say, unchanging identity to what is transitory. So that's essentially a mistake, an error. But yeah, and then the extreme and false views, not sure with that, and with them ignorance and doubt. So these constitute the views, and then we have then the actions, such as the with them ignorant. What is it again? The power of anger, and 4 things indirectly counter them. Anyway, these all add up to 10, and somehow there's the multiplication. Okay, I won't pretend I'm completely grasping this here, but anyway, the ways that these exist throughout the various realms in samsara, we have the desire realm, we have the form realm, and the formless realms. So somehow this adds up to 112. Not exactly sure how, but anyway, these are what is eliminated through the path of seeing. So remember, we have 5 paths. We can describe the journey to enlightenment in terms of the 5 paths. The path of accumulation, the path of joining, and that's where then what follows there is the path of seeing and the path of meditation, which finally leads to the 5th, which is then the path of no more learning. Anyway, it says here, this may be explained as follows. Anyway, there you go. 112 obscurations are eliminated by seeing. 10 of these are root obscurations, and of these, 5 are views and 5 are not views. Those that are not views are the emotions of attachment, anger, pride, confusion, and doubt. Those that are views are opinions, are the view of the transitory composite, the belief in an I, the view of extremes, wrong views of doctrinal superiority, and the view of ethical superiority. This is actually, let's see what the footnote said. This is actually quite important. See Appendix 4. Okay. Defiled views. Tawa Nyön Monchen. I might just pass on that. Quite simply, what we mean with the wrong views of doctrinal superiority is just basically the opinion that we are better. So even though you could say our view might be accurate, this shouldn't necessarily result in arrogance. So that's where, on the basis of having a correct view, we could very well go into, well, we're better than others, and have this sort of arrogance. Tawa Chozin in Tibetan. And the other is Tsultimla Chokpa Zimba, which is then when we have ethical action, but again, then we're full of ourselves, basically spiritual pride, but particularly with regards to keeping vows very purely and so forth. So these are seen as problems in terms of views. In the realm of desire, these 10 factors are detrimental to each of the 4 truths, thus making 40 factors to be eliminated. Okay. In the form and formless realms, anger does not occur, with the result that there are only 9 factors run counter to the 4 truths. This makes twice 36, 72 items. Add this to the previous 40 elements and the total comes to 112 obscurations eliminated through seeing. Okay, yeah. By seeing, does it mean seeing qualities of eyes? No. This is actually, we talk about seeing Dhamata, or seeing the nature of reality. So this is where the practitioner arrives at a place of actually directly having a perception, direct insight into the nature of reality. We can call this realization, and this is then stabilized through then the path of meditation. So how the obscurations militate against the understanding of the 4 truths. The 3 views and two non-views that run directly counter to an understanding of the Four Truths act in the following way. The view of the transitory composite asserts the Four Truths in terms of I and mine. Okay, let's just see what they say about that. In this context, the Four Truths must be understood not as general principles, but as classes of phenomena. Thus, one speaks not of the truth of suffering, but rather of true sufferings, true origins, and so on, referring thereby to the phenomenal world. In this particular instance, the focus is on the five aggregates. So in this sense, then, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths is not merely just understanding in terms of self as something that can be overcome, but actual self as truly existing. And then the self is founded on the basis of the reality of the five skandhas, etc. The view of extremes is the belief that this self is either permanently existent or completely annihilated at death. And this is also interesting, isn't it? Because that's, of course, what we have generally, the way we're brought up and that sort of general understanding. But it's not just in our culture, it's also something that's really intrinsic to, you say, the human condition or possibly the sentient condition altogether. So that's belief that there's me and there's me that you know, when you're dead, that's it. Wrong view will simply deny the law of karma, among other things. So that's where what we refer to as wrong view is just not understanding the nature of cause and effect. The non-view of ignorance will simply not know what the Four Truths signifies. So that's ignorance. And then you have doubt. While doubt will hesitate over them and question their veracity. And that's where doubt, this can be, we sometimes say doubt can be the gateway to faith if we actually follow through. But if we're just stuck there with doubt, I doubt that, and we don't really take it further. And that's where actually doubting requires a fair amount of, if we actually take doubt to the extent of critical thinking, that actually implies faith, because that's where we trust it enough to actually bother to think about it and go through with, you could say, a critical analysis. But if we have no trust in something, then just we doubt it, and actually we couldn't care less from then on. So it's something that really gets in the way. All these factors jeopardize a proper understanding of the Four Truths, and because they do so, unless prevented by other extraneous factors, they are regarded as directly running counter to them. So this is something that gets in the way of us understanding the Four Noble Truths. We could even see it in terms of us when we're in a situation of having a curable problem, not just wanting to do something about the problem. So the Four Noble Truths we can understand in many different ways, but of course here it's understood in terms of the remedy for samsara. Two non-views and two views are indirectly injurious. Of the former, attachment clings to the mistaken views mentioned in the previous paragraph, and through pride, the mind arrogantly persists in this erroneous opinion. So that's, of course, where we have one thing is that we are attached to a particular view, but then, and this also then comes with this particular arrogance or pride, stubborn determination to just hold on to one's view. The view of doctrinal superiority regards false teachings as superior, while the view of ethical superiority will consider these erroneous ideas, together with all connected disciplines, as effective means to liberation. Okay. That's sometimes explained in slightly different ways, but running counter to an understanding of the Four Truths. These four factors are based on wrong view, and the latter is therefore seen as imposing itself between the truths and the factors themselves. So that's why us not seeing properly prevents us from actually discovering, and our view actually gets in the way of actually investigating reality. It is for this reason that these factors are said to run counter to the Four Truths indirectly. They simply just prevent us from actually even analyzing and attempting to understand the Four Noble Truths. Anger, as the verse says, is generally detrimental on account of its conditioning power. For in addition to holding erroneous views, people may be irritated when others disagree with them. When this happens, their anger is not, of course, directed at the Four Truths or their own view. Consequently, anger is regarded as inimical to the Four Truths only by its conditioning power. Let's see what they say here. In other words, by the negative effect it has on the general situation and the process of understanding. So that's where wrong view gets in the way, or anger gets in the way. There are a few subtle differences in the way these factors run counter to the truth of cessation and the path. It is, however, enough to understand the points just explained, which apply mainly to the first two truths of suffering and origins. According to Khenpo Pema Sherab, some authorities maintain that these 10 factors cannot truly militate against the truth of the path, because the latter is the wisdom of no self, and therefore the very antidote to these 10 factors. Okay. One should, moreover, be familiar with these systems. Sorry, there's a lot of little footnotes, but then, i.e., we're talking the Hinayana, that teach the cessation, that cessation involves the complete destruction of the mind stream, and that the path is the process that brings this about. Of course, we're talking about destruction of the stream of delusion, ordinary deluded mind. So that was the 112. Now we have the 414 obscurations eliminated on the path of meditation. It is said, craving, anger, pride, stupidity, the transitory composite, and extreme views, these 6 are driven out by meditation. So we looked at the path of seeing. Now we're looking at the path of meditation. Within desire, all 6 are found, while form and formless, meaning the desire realm, while form and formless realms have only 5, arranged by level and intensity, 414 obscurations thus are numbered. As this quotation shows, there are 6 root obscurations eliminated by meditation. These are attachment, anger, pride, ignorance, and the view of the transitory composite, and the view of extremes. If these are calculated according to the 3 realms of existence, they come to a total of 16. Six times 3, how's that? This will be explained. In the desire realm, there are 6 obscurations, while in the form and formless realms, where anger does not occur, there are 5 apiece. Yes. Alternatively, if these obscurations are categorized according to the levels of mundane existence, there are 6 for the desire realm, 5 in each of the 4 levels of samadhi in the form realm, i.e. 20 altogether, and 5 in each of the 4 levels of the formless realm, again 20. By adding them together, this comes to 46 obscurations. According to the intensity, each of these 46 can be broken down into 9 subdivisions. This comes to a grand total of 414 obscurations. Moreover, the 5 obscurations, discounting anger, can be categorized according to a system of 9 mundane levels and 9 degrees of intensity. This comes to 405, and with the 9 degrees of anger in the desire realm, we have a total of 414. Within the 3 realms of desire, form and formlessness, there are 9 mundane levels. The first of these levels correspond to the whole of the desire realm, while the remaining 8 comprise the 4 samadhis in in the form realm, and the 4 levels of the formless realms: infinite space, infinite consciousness, utter nothingness, and neither existence nor non-existence. There are also 9 levels of intensity. For example, attachment in the desire realm may be broken down into 9 degrees: great, middle, and small of the great, great, middle, and small of the middle, and great, middle, and small of the small. All told, this comes to 9 levels of intensity for each obscuration. Now, the difference between the Hinayana and Mahayana approaches to the removal of obscurations. The obscurations eliminated on the path of seeing are the mind's incorrect imputations. So when we're talking about the path of seeing, we are essentially saying looking beyond our ordinary projections and seeing clear of confusion. So there are innumerable kinds of thought that veil the essential nature of mind. All, however, can be grouped under 2 headings: the misconception superimposed on what is the case, drotak, and innate or co-emergent thought patterns, hengye, of clinging to a supposed I and mine. So you could say some are those that we developed on the basis of concepts, and other is the something that you could say is inborn in the sense of natural for anybody in samsara. The conceived objects, shenyu, of both these ways of thinking, i.e. superimpositions and innate thought patterns, are the 2 selves: the self of persons and the self of phenomena. So this is what essentially obscures or veils the essential nature of mind. These 2 selves are apprehended and clung to by these 2 kinds of thought. So there are 2 kinds of thought: is the one that is adopted, or you could say conditioned through culture, learning, and so forth, ideas that have been acquired, and the innate, fundamental, that we as sentient beings are born with. So the 2 selves, self of person, me, the subject here, and what I perceive out there as phenomena, as outer objects, the phenomenal world, things. These 2 selves, they are essentially driven by these 2 kinds of thoughts. All artificially imputed conceptions of self are eliminated by the wisdom of the path of seeing, the direct understanding of reality. The conceptions of self that are the object of the innate thought patterns are eliminated by the wisdom of the path of meditation, which is the sustained training and familiarization of the mind in the wisdom gained on the path of seeing. The wisdom of the Mahayana paths of seeing and meditation destroys emotional obscurations such as avarice, as well as cognitive obscurations, which are the notions of a truly existent subject. Which are notions of a truly existent subject, object, and actions. So that's where, in general, the path of seeing is there, where we eliminate this misconception about reality, and also it's where we so this is at the cognitive level, and also then the emotional obscurations such as attachment, avarice, and cognitive obscurations, which is this belief that there's a self, there's an object, and there's an action. And together with these, then, all their connected tendencies. This, then, is how the qualities of eliminations are perfected. Thus, then, the term pangpa in the root verse, meaning elimination. Let's see here. Thus, the term pampa of the rootness can be interpreted as referring to both the superimpositions and the innate thought patterns that are eliminated. So that, again, these 2 styles of confusion. Alternatively, the pangpa, which means elimination, may be understood not as what is to be eliminated, but as the eliminator, namely wisdom. Just as the banishing of the miseries of samsara can be understood as the positive state of deliverance, liberation or nirvana in the same way, the wisdoms of seeing and meditation may be understood not merely as antidotes to their corresponding defects, but as the wisdom or freedom in which such defects have no place. It is therefore correct to interpret the root verse by saying that emotional and cognitive obscurations are destroyed by the two kinds of wisdom. So this was commentary by then Khenpo Yönten Gyatso. So basically here at the end, it's basically saying we can understand this elimination in terms of something where we're just talking about what's no longer there, or we can talk about it in terms of what is there. One is the absence of confusion, and the other is the presence of wisdom. So the obscurations eliminated on the path of seeing are the mind's incorrect imputations. So again, simply what we, for example, what is the object of refutation in all the Madhyamaka studies, which is essentially the self of person and the self of phenomena, the confused belief in the self of person, confused belief of the self of phenomena. These are eliminated by the simple seeing or realization of the Four Truths. So that's where the Four Truths is what essentially points out the delusion, how the delusion is constructed, and liberation, and how liberation can be brought about. By contrast, the obscurations eliminated on the path of meditation are co-emergent and innate. So that's one is what we call Tongpang, and the other is another is called Gompang. This is in Tibetan, but one is elimination through seeing, and the other is elimination through meditation. Let's see what it says here. Care should be taken with the word innate. The translation of Lingpa. It is used here to refer to contents, or rather proclivities, that are already present in the mind at birth, and which are to be distinguished from the false imputations or ideas that are freshly made or entertained in each new lifetime under the influence of false tenet systems. So that's also what we looked at earlier. Jotak here, both artificial imputations, kuntak, and innate thought patterns, Lingpa, are kinds of emotional obscurations, nyendrip. Artificial imputations are relatively shallow. They arise conceptually and are comparatively easy to remove. So again, this talks about the ideas that we might have, the way that we label things, judge things, and so forth. This is fairly, or rather, this is doable. This is doable, fairly straightforward. That's why we can use, you could say, the kind of refutations we have in Madhyamaka reasoning and so forth. And we can kind of get it. Yes, we can see. But, so these are the artificial imputations, the ideas or the culturally created ideas. These arise conceptually and are comparatively easy to remove. On the other hand, innate thought patterns are much stronger, being a conditioning from previous existences. An example would be an aggressive tendency already deep-rooted in the temperament of a small child. The cognitive obscurations, shidrip, also consists of artificial imputations and innate thought patterns. But in this context, they're usually referred to as gross and subtle obscurations, respectively. The former are eliminated on the path of seeing, while the latter disappear only in the course of the path of meditation. So again, these can be approached in terms of just seeing, a bit like when we see something is simply like seeing a paper tiger. We just, through seeing that it's just a paper tiger, that recognition takes care of the fear that we have of what we thought was a tiger. But these other, the more deeper, subtle obscurations, they're more difficult. They lie much deeper. So, how did we get here? Sorry. I think I've landed in a different chapter. Yeah. We somehow landed in the wrong chapter. Okay. Okay, I think we're back here. Okay, here we are. So we talked about, by contrast, the obscurations eliminated on the path of meditation are co-emergent or innate. So essentially, the path of seeing eliminates the incorrect imputations, the ideas. The path of meditation works on a much more subtle level. These cannot be annihilated, referring to the obscurations that the path of meditation eliminates. These cannot be annihilated by the mere realization of the Four Truths. They can only be removed gradually by dint of an increasing immersion in this realization. The practitioner of the Hinayana claim that the obscurations eliminated by seeing are only to be removed on the transmundane path. Okay. I.e., the Hinayana path of seeing. Okay. On the other hand, they say that the obscurations eliminated by meditation can be removed even on the mundane path. In their opinion, it is thus possible to rid oneself of the obscurations eliminated by meditation while still in the desire realm. In other words, prior to the elimination of obscurations by seeing. They call this path of leapover and assert that there are two kinds of Shravakas abiding on this path. Candidates for the state of once returner and non-returner. It's interesting, the word is actually Tögalwa. So somebody who directly sort of passes over. Let's see what the Hinayana path of meditation consists of the progressive stages of the development of meditative absorption. Obviously, the samadhis of form and the formless absorptions can be cultivated before the supramundane path of seeing is reached. For they can be attained by non-Buddhist meditators, although in their case, since the wisdom of emptiness, i.e. the path of seeing, is absent, such accomplishments do not result in liberation from samsara. This is why it is said in the Hinayana that practitioners may cultivate the higher absorptions while at the same time working toward the path of seeing, and before they achieve this. Those who do this are said to be on the path of leapover, the implication being that when they attain the path of seeing, they leap over the stages of the path of meditation that they have already accomplished. Those on the path of leapover are either once returners or non-returners. Thus, it can be said that the second and third Hinayana levels can be attained by the worldly path, while the first and fourth are attained only by the transmundane path. Okay. It was, however, only for the sake of encouraging his disciples and in order to inspire them with interest for the path that the Buddha skillfully taught this doctrine. In point of fact, nothing on the mundane path can counteract obscurations to be eliminated by meditation. These obscurations can only be removed on the superior or supramundane level. What we're talking about here are the various samadhis and the various levels in which, yes, there's some degree of the afflictions can be pacified through meditation, but it's only on the supramundane or at the level of seeing beyond the ordinary constructs, ordinary obscurations, that the subtle obscurations are removed. According to the Mahayana, this kind of obscuration is not eradicated, but only suppressed on the mundane path. So that's where just engaging in samadhis doesn't necessarily eradicate the cause of suffering or the cause of obscuration. And by mundane path is meant the samadhis of form and the formless absorptions. These are concentrations that lack the wisdom of vipassana. So there's the element of shamatha, there's the element of resting, but there's not the insight that sees the irreality. And simply just, it's again like coming back to finding peace with the fact that there's a snake right next to you. You don't actually look and you don't actually realize that there isn't a snake to begin with. In fact, there is just there's just a rope. And that's why while the situation of being next to a snake, you could say, can be remedied through simply going into meditation, the actual cause of wanting to enter into meditation to get away from the fear of snake, it's really just, you could say, remedied in terms of the symptom, but not actually the cause. So that's where getting to really the cause of suffering, seeing that there actually is no snake, that is the wisdom of vipassana. So that's where just entering into samadhis are not seen as the ultimate solution, or the jhanas. By contrast, the transmundane path is the union of shamatha and vipassana, linked with the wisdom of realizing the non-existence of the personal and phenomenal self, which we have then discussed, seeing that the self is that we impute on the basis of the skandhas actually is non-existent. The solidity of the phenomena that we impute in terms of the elements, the external world, also do not have a true inherent existence. Okay. Gonna stop here. Are these obscurations fabricated? Where do they come from? Well, this is the nature of samsara, and this comes about on the basis of ignorance. So we would always say, on the basis of ignorance, sentient beings, they wander in samsara even though they're innocent. Sentient beings are not bad. They just happen to get things wrong. And this, of course, is what we've looked at previously in terms of the way that that we looked at the 12 links of dependent origination and so forth. So so that's where we could say these obscurations, yes, they're fabricated by ignorance. Just like when we're confused, we might look at that rope and think it's a snake. So it's not that there actually has been a snake. And it's not as if there actually anything has changed. It's just that we've constructed this this obscuration. So it simply just is, it is ignorance that generates the experience of samsara. Yeah, I got lost in the math. I did too, don't worry. Well, let's just, if you're very keen on it, I would say revisiting it, but I hope you will forgive me for not sort of going over that. But I think if you look at it thoroughly, you're perfectly capable of finding out. So these are, again, these categories. Yeah. Okay. If there are no more questions, you're certainly very welcome to ask questions, but I'm just thinking to leave it at this for tonight. Thank you for stopping. My brain is burning. Yeah, don't let it burn. I mean, this is all, let it wash over you. And this is something that, of course, the more one revisits it, it's sort of, it comes back. I'm not terribly familiar with this material. I've sort of been exposed to it before. It's not entirely unfamiliar, but yeah, I understand. But again, it's something that not to worry too much. And you know, sometimes one gets something, it sticks, and other times, well, if it doesn't stick, not worry too much about it. Just think, oh, there's a lot of qualities associated with with the Buddha and with the qualities of what we call elimination and realization. I've studied with Theravadan masters, and they never ever imputed a self to phenomena. That's right. Yeah, they saw not self in. That's right. This is right. They saw the not self in self and phenomena equally. It seems this text suggests they only see not self in self. That is, if Hinayana is the same as Theravada. Sorry if I keep defending the great wisdom in Theravada too. Well, that's why I so often say we shouldn't conflate or confuse what we have as a doctrinal term in Mahayana, which is Hinayana. Hinayana is a Mahayana word for what is seen as lower doctrines. And to actually begin to say, oh, there's traditions out there, I think is very tricky. We really have to distinguish between living traditions and the doctrinal positions that we have when we describe what's called doxography, when we describe doctrine. For example, you have the tenet systems in the Mahayana, the Vibhashika, the Sautrantika, the Yogacarya, and the Madhyamaka. And these, of course, work beautifully in terms of actually enabling us to, like we just went through the progressive stages of emptiness, right? And that's where you can see all of these, they actually have a role in terms of our gradual development. So that's where they all have a particular role in terms of, you could say, an organic growth. And so also you could say the logic of understanding increasing subtle phenomena, or increasing subtle understanding of emptiness. It's very helpful to have these presentations. Some of these refutations, they can be understood fairly easy unless they don't go too far. So that's why sometimes in terms of the way that we understand mind and self and so on, we describe it more in terms of more simple views like the Sautrantika and Vaibhashika ways of categorizing it. Right away to go into Madhyamaka can be pretty confounding. So there's this methodology, and of course it's in there that we find the term Hinayana and so forth. And I think it's very problematic if we begin to associate it with actual traditions. We should really just understand it as doctrinal classifications. A quick word about Druptab Kuntu, if possible and appropriate here. Yeah, Druptab Kuntu was collected by Jamgon. Well, I think it's included within Jamgon Zawampo's Sungbum, but it's I think collected by, what is it again, by Chinsa Wangpo and Lota Wangpo. And I think it's essentially a collection of Sakya and Kaju, essentially what we call new translation, sadhana practices. So it's essentially a lot of different, a lot of sadhanas, a lot of empowerments. So the mundane path is the Shravaka path, yes. It's a bit more subtle than that. The mundane path here refers to just the actual practice of going into meditation, in which you say it pacifies some of the ordinary afflictions. But it's mundane in the sense that it doesn't actually contain the vipassana that sees the nature of reality. And a lot of people mistake Hinayana for actual living Theravadan, though I agree it's problematic. Yes, sometimes people are trying to be. It gets even more confusing because people are trying to be nice. They actually trying to say, oh, when people do believe that Hinayana means particular traditions out there, then they begin to use Theravada for the Hinayana terms that come up in the teachings. That makes it very confusing, actually. But it's a very common practice nowadays. So then teachers, they want to be politically correct. And then when the Hinayana word comes up, they say Theravada, which actually sort of adds what's it called, injury to insult. But what can you do? It's but it comes from a good place, but it is rather confusing. So I think we need to understand Hinayana is a doctrinal classification. Theravada is a living tradition, and they do what they do. Each of the yanas has to do with the speed at which you can reach enlightenment of Buddhahood. Not sure who thought of this. No, it's not so much. Well, yes, you could say it's the speed. It's more that it's the perspective. It's how you understand reality. So the various yanas, they take particular ways in which we can accept the world. So for example, what we mean about Hinayana is that that's the place where we still think of the world as possessing actual particles. And it's also a place where we talk about subtle consciousness in terms of the elements that constitute the continuity of experience. So that's the Hinayana. And that's where you could say, yes, that in itself actually doesn't even lead perfectly to enlightenment, but it can lead to a state of liberation from suffering. So that's what we then refer to there. And again, this is just doctrinal classification. These are then what we refer to as the stage of abiding in peace, according to the Arhat. But then there's the Mahayana, where there's a greater insight into the nature of emptiness, of reality. And so there you have the Yogacharya, you have the Madhyamika, who have increasingly profound insights. But we would say, as long as there still operates with the conceptual mind as the vehicle, then it takes a long time to achieve enlightenment. And that's where the Vajrayana approach is taking wisdom, and we'll get to that, but that is taking the unobscured, unconfused insight into reality as the very ground of the path. And that ensures a very radical approach to enlightenment, which is then where we talk about enlightenment in very few lifetimes. You're welcome. Okay. So I'm not sure who thought of this. It actually comes from something called the Samdhinyamochana Sutra, where we also talk about the various turnings of the wheel. So you can find it in there. The Buddha taught this in the Samdhinyamochana, which you can find in 84,000, Unraveling the Intent, it's called, in the 84,000s. It's a very interesting sutra. All right. Thank you very much for joining us here. Okay, see you. There's only a few Saturdays left before I might take a break. I'm going to be going to Europe, and hold on, my computer's about to die. I'm going to be traveling a little bit, so there'll be a little bit of a hiatus, a little bit of a break for a couple of months. I'll be leaving here end of June and back end of August, so there'll be a 2-month break. But we'll be going this week and the following week, I think. Hold on. Oops. Yeah. Yeah. I hope you can see the dedication. Okay. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.